In the distant future, vampires rule the night, but their numbers are dwindling. One podcast is unlike all the others. Half human, half vampire. This is Lefty Speaks, the official podcast for Vampire Hunter D.
Hello, hunters, and welcome back to Lefty Speaks, the Vampire Hunter D podcast. This is episode 6, our Q&A with Kevin Leahy, and following this will be story time with Kevin Leahy, the series translator to English for the entire Vampire Hunter D franchise, and the man we could largely attribute credit to for the fact that Vampire Hunter D ever made it into English. So if you are outside of Japan and have come across a Vampire Hunter D anything, this is the guy you should say thank you to. So we would like to say a huge welcome from Lefty Speaks for Kevin.
Awesome.
Woo!
Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
So in our Q&A of the questions submitted, I'm going to quickly knock out a question that was not directed at Kevin, but one we wanted to answer. It was in regards to Message from Mars. Will those who missed out on the Kickstarter be able to purchase the comic either in trade paperback or digital format? Maybe. Message from Mars was done as a test run because as comics as we think of it in America, UK, Europe, the single skinny 20 to 24 page story page little skinny
floppy. They call them the
floppy
floppies.
booklet. Yeah, the floppy comics. They don't exist in Japan. So we ended up sending a box of a bunch of different single issue comics over to Japan so everybody on the Japanese team could see them and look at them because they don't publish like that in Japan. And so Message from Mars was supposed to be a test, which out of that test, it was received well enough that we're going forward and doing an entire novel now. So thank you for everyone who supported that. That made a world of difference. That's why we're here now doing the next thing for a full novel adaptation and going for what we hope will be a movie as well. So, because of that test, the way the deal was done, it's not set up to do full retail because it was a test. So that's why we did Kickstarter. So that's something we would like to address in the future so that it can become available through more of a retail channel. So stay tuned. It is definitely on our radar, and we wanted to address that question. So, however,
I do
Brandon
have an eBay store, and I am the writer. For those who are new, I am the writer of Message from Mars, and I do have some surplus copies of both the full hardcover, the supersized hardcover package, and the extremely rare Micro Broussard issue 1s. And I just made a big batch available, and they sold out literally in probably less than 30 minutes. So I do have some left. And I will be offering them again. So go to or look up the Vampire Hunter D official Discord channel, or go to our Patreon, which also has information about the Discord. Through there, that's usually our primary channel for getting out the information. Please join the Discord. It's free, and you get to talk to us semi-regularly. So check it out.
And if you are interested in those copies, please keep in mind, you can't get them from me. You can't get them from Unified Pictures. We don't have extra copies. These are Brandon's personal copies that he got from being a part of the project that he is making available. So if you want them, it's Brandon. That's it.
The personal stash.
Hey, I paid for those.
Yeah.
I paid a lot for those.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to let your creators have access to your stuff. And so that's something that going forward, I think we'll do even more of, so that more of the books end up in the hands of our creative team. So as we learn and grow, we hope you all learn and grow with us. That's part of life on this planet. You make mistakes, you learn, you go forward. Enough of us. So I'm going to jump into the questions here. One of the questions, let's see here. Kevin, what's the most difficult thing when translating from Japanese to English?
I would have to say that it's the cultural differences. One of the biggest differences in the books in the original Japanese is when a character is first introduced, we get their name. And then almost for the rest of the book, we get their job. So it's Sheriff Smith. And then the rest of the book in Japanese, it would just be Sheriff. And I try to mix it up and keep the name in play. But in Japan, it's obviously much more important what you are than who you are. So I have to kind of massage it a little into the, English-speaking cultural norms as opposed to the original Japanese.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So with the names, I know that, depending upon the kanji that's used, names can have vastly different meanings, and obviously in English that's all lost, right? Is there any time that you feel the need to kind of include a little bit of the meaning of this character's name, the implication, or is it just too complicated?
That's an excellent point, Neal. Actually, unlike Mr. K's other series, in D, the first book was the only one where he actually gave characters names written out in kanji. Wow. The names like Gollum and Reikinsei, and those were written in kanji. And so the first time I introduced the character, I used the meaning of those characters. So they call him Gollum the Painless, because that's the characters it was written with, no pain. Or Reikinsei, the Silver Star. And so I explained the first time what it was. But that was a big issue, that I wanted people to get the full context. And it does take a little work, but that was very sharp of you.
I wonder if it's, because I think of Japanese, for me, one of the big things as a kid that I learned was that the last name is first and the first name is last, because your family, the clan, is more important than the individual. So I'm assuming that also has a lot to play with it, because growing up, everybody, I'm out in public and I'm hearing the last name. I'm like, why is everybody using grandma's last name? She's grandma.
Yeah,
it's like, because I didn't get it when I was 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely something that you're in this Western milieu, and you have a very cowboy story, and yet there are just certain elements of Japanese culture, because Mr. Kikuchi is Japanese, that are just in there and need explaining or need a slight adjustment to make it a little bit more palatable and understandable for the Western audience.
Okay. Let's see here. The next question here is dealing with the continuation of the novel series.
Yes.
So let's see here. It's a thank you for in addition to the question, they're saying thank you for translating to English. It's greatly appreciated. In terms of the books that haven't been translated, are you going to translate them as well, or is Goldfiend the last one? Which, if I remember right, Goldfiend got caught up in the COVID printing paper shortage mess.
Exactly.
We all got caught up in that mess.
Yeah.
Yes. Goldfiend, I was told to hold my horses, because there was, no idea when they'd be able to put it out. So that was put on hold and remained on hold for a couple of years. And that was the last one in our current contract with Dark Horse. And I'm hopeful that we'll continue at some point. I will definitely continue at some point. I did the first 3 books on spec. I'm willing to do many, many more books on spec. That's just me. But I plan to be around another 30 years. So they're definitely getting done in one form or another. With all the options on the internet, I'm sure we can come up with something at some point. But count on it. More books.
Awesome. That's good to know, because right now they've been doing the omnibus, and they seem to have been selling pretty well. Yep. So that gives hope for resumption post-COVID. And there's so many things that we've seen that, getting restarted is rough.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I never thought we'd get as many books out as we did. I thought 3 books, maybe 6 books, 30 books, beyond my wildest dreams. But now I want them all.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
So say we all.
Exactly.
Awesome. Let's see here. Moving down the list. This one I'm guessing might be a little tough. And if there's any of these that you feel is a little rough to answer, please feel free to tell us that. We just want to acknowledge that the question was asked, and if it's something that we can't dig into, we can't dig into. So let's see here. Kevin, do you have any plans of translating the BB Project story, or I'm assuming also on this for context, the other stories and franchises that Kikuchi-san has written?
I would love to. I mean, I'm always up for translating. When I'm not doing this, I do other freelance stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to live long enough to be able to translate everything he did. I mean, we're talking like 400 books, but I would love to do more of his work. I've read some of his other series just, as a fan. And I would love to do more work with him and to get more of his work out there where people could appreciate it. So, yeah, I'm down for anything.
Yeah, no, we've had some long conversations about the Treasure Hunter series. So, I mean, that was one that, as you explained it to me, always caught my fascination as well. And then I think between Demon City, Shinjuku, and Wicked City, there's another, I think, 15, 20 books. So.
Oh, yeah, it's just, he is a machine. He just he was putting out 15 books a year for a lot of years. And yeah.
Could we have
incredible.
him teach Patrick Rothfuss and George R. Martin something for,
that would be nice.
Please. Okay. Next up. Which of the Vampire Hunter D novels did you enjoy translating the most, and why?
When I saw this question, I had to think about it because obviously, I started it because I enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed them all to various degrees. But when I thought about this question, the first one that came to mind was Dark Nocturne. Mm-hmm. And as for why, it is the Spumoni of the Vampire Hunter D universe. It's got those 3 flavors, it's got those 3 shorts. And I think for a lot of writers, not just Mr. Kikuchi, but Stephen King or others, the short story or the novella is really where they had to prove themselves. Before they got the novel gigs, they were, selling to magazines, and it had to be short. It had to be just a distillation of pure action and excitement. And so I really like the shorts. You get those 3 delicious flavors under one cover. And so I would say Dark Nocturne was probably my favorite.
That makes me want to go read that one because I haven't made it to that one yet. As I jumped around the whole publishing franchise series and reading. It makes me think of, in my head, when I was reading a bunch of the short stories, I read The Village, On the Road, and Portrait of Yosbel back to back.
Okay.
And I loved, and I thought, you know what? I could kind of see the 3 of these bridging together. Like if he's on the way, he's been hired, because he was hired for the family for the Yosbel story. Mm-hmm. And he stumbles across the village, and then there's the road. So I always, in my head, my headspace, those 3 short stories live together of it. Well, D came across the village by accident while on the road to this job that he was hired for.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I find that kind of thing fascinating, how it all easily ties together.
I think the shorts and the novellas, they actually seem a lot more suited towards a movie or anime than even the full-length novels, because novels just have so much in them, even if it's a single volume novel, that you gotta, you gotta kill your babies there. You gotta cut a lot of stuff. And so I think the shorts and the novellas might be even more adaptable than the novels.
Yeah, we
Yeah, I
were
mean, I can
talking in a
say
previous
from
episode on that.
yeah,
Yeah.
from us looking at all the, at the time at Davis Films, I think there were, when I first started, there was maybe 19 or 20 that were adapted into English, and by the end, there was, I think, 26, and we were still, I mean, like, it's difficult to put one book in a movie without cutting out important aspects, and then there's this whole argument about, like, okay, well, do you use exposition to catch people up or not? Because that's also something we don't really want to do in a movie anyway, right? So it does create challenges, and I think we see a lot now in with the streaming. There's so much, like, just wonderful TV that's out there, and that's because these novels and comic series can be properly adapted, when a feature film really can be really limiting. When I mean, it's a challenge. It can
Yeah,
be done, but you always have to make difficult choices.
I love the streaming format because it lets you do those 6-hour stories that people aren't going to sit still for in a movie. And yeah, I think that's probably more suited to the B&T books, especially when you get into those 2, 3, 4 volume type stories.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
Kikuchi.
streaming executives with Greenlight. I hope you're listening to this episode. Give us a long series, long episode count.
I mean, that's the trick about adapting Kikuchi, because in very short paragraphs, he makes you care about all these ancillary characters.
Yep.
And that's very difficult to do, believe it or not, sometimes in film and television adaptations. I always think about the first episode of X-Files, and you only get a little bit of time to get to know Mulder and Scully, and they have that great conversation in his office when they first meet, for those who remember all that stuff. But I feel like that Kikuchi's writing, especially in the first few novels, even when you get to Mysterious Journey to the North and so forth, you get these people, these capsules of these people. And like Stephen King, but Stephen King lets you get to know him, like in The Stand. I feel like Vampire Hunter D is very similar to the unabridged version. The totality of Vampire Hunter D is very similar to the unabridged version of The Stand, where you've got all these people. And somehow King makes you care about them in a very short amount of time. The same thing with his short story, The Mist, which obviously got turned into the movie. But in The Mist, I think a lot about the first few pages of Vampire Hunter D's first book, where in The Mist, you got a whole grocery store full of people, each one an archetype. And you have to figure out a way. And to turn that into a movie or a pilot, ridiculously difficult. I try to do it with Mysterious Journey to the North. So we've all been kind of in awe of what you've been able to do and to pull out and to put in there to translate what Kikuchi was attempting and did achieve in his books and short stories.
Thank you. Well, I was going to say, I think that the novel adaptation is probably the most forgiving of the formats. When you're doing a TV show or a movie, or even the comic book, talking about the manga version of D, you're very limited to page count, and with the novels, it takes as long as it takes. If it takes an extra 50 pages, you've got 50 pages. They just make the book thicker. And so out of them all, I have the most forgiving. It's just, do your thing. More is better. Bigger books look better. And so just go ape.
Yeah, comic book, it's like you get 24 story pages if you're lucky. It's like, oh, that's it. Squeeze it down.
Yep.
Yeah, and with film, it's interesting because if you have to cut certain aspects out to fit in, like ideally a 90 to 120 page script, sometimes you then need to add other things in to make up make up for it because you had to cut out too much. I mean, it sounds counterintuitive, but sometimes you end up fusing two novels together, taking bits and pieces of the two, hoping that you can get a second and third movie to then revisit the things you had to cut out, because by themselves they wouldn't have worked in the movie. So they kind of needed other aspects that you get in the other in the other novels to make them make more sense. Again, without doing a flashback or without doing an exposition and things like that. Like if you really want to kind of be more of a purist in your storytelling. So it's very interesting to hear how each of these different mediums have completely different ways to adapt them that are unique for that medium. Yeah.
Alrighty, and it appears that I, in formatting this, screwed up one of this previous question where we were talking about all the different things that Mr. K has written. The question was specifically followed on one of the fans when they found out that there was an epilogue to the Armageddon short story. They've been dying to read it and wanted to know what the chances are of that ever getting done.
I just found out that there is an epilogue to Armageddon. Like I was today years old when I found out. So I would like to read it as well. So I'll see what I can do. But
well, if anybody's got a direct pipeline.
It's kind of funny because the story Armageddon, it seemed kind of final. It looked like the last throwdown, the last showdown. And so I would be interested to see what could possibly happen after that. But
okay,
yeah,
well, we may
look
need to
around.
research this question a little more on our end, because I was like, wait, I thought Armageddon was kind of, I read the Armageddon story years ago in the Reader's Guide and that short story collection. So okay.
It was originally done for the Kanoke art book that Amano put out, and there were a number of short stories. Portrait of Isabel was in there, and those were originally a different translator, and then I retranslated them for the Reader's Guide and added additional shorts. But in that case, yeah, I'm not sure when this other BB project came out, and I'll have to look into this because I would love to know what happens next.
Maybe that means we might have to have a Kevin part 2 at some point.
Oh no, perish the thought. Yeah, anytime.
Kevin, we're gonna need to secure permission to live read the translation to this mystery story. Oh, I'm getting myself in so much trouble right now. All right, before I get myself into too much trouble, moving on. Next question. Does a book end up being more or less pages when it's in English?
Ooh.
Tough call. The Japanese books are about 16 lines to a page, but each line will often just be a line of dialogue, or it's not incorporated in paragraphs the same way as in English. So it looks like an action haiku, basically. You've got a line of dialogue, then the next line will be an action, dialogue. And so it fills the pages up pretty quickly. And I get paid by the page, not by the word. So it's like, oh, dialogue, yes. Oh, it's an easy page. Because I set myself a goal of, okay, I'm going to do 100 sentences a day. I'm going to do 200 sentences a day. So we get more pages or in Japanese than in English because the English condenses it. But Japanese writing is very compact, so you have, 2-to-1, 3-to-1 ratio of compactness using the kanji characters and the other syllabary. So basically, things take 3 times as much space to write in English as they do in Japanese. So I think page-wise, because of the size of the English pages, it would end up being fewer pages, but then Dark Horse had the genius idea to put the teaser chapter for the next book in, which I love, except for the fact that I have to translate the teaser a month or 6 months or a year ahead of when I had planned on doing it. So often that requires me to get deep into the book to know where everything's going, so that I don't say anything in the first chapter translation that's not going to hold true for the rest of my translation. But
And
that
yet avoid
helped,
spoilers.
that helped make the book a little bit more robust in its thickness. And so, yeah, long story short, English sentences are longer, but English pages are bigger, so probably fewer pages.
Gotcha.
Wow.
Bigger pages, but fewer pages.
Yes.
And the other thing I would noted is that, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but for the Japanese publication, there are where we'll get some books that are one book or a two-part for a story in English. It'll be a four-parter in Japanese. Am I remembering that correctly?
Right. Yeah, Japanese, they would not make really telephone book thickness novels. I think part of it is when they're paying translators to translate foreign books into Japanese, they have to recoup those costs. So they would publish them as 2 or 3 books. If you had a big whopping book like Dune would come out as like 3 novels in Japan just to recoup that translating cost. And also to make it more manageable when you're on the train or wherever you're reading.
Yeah, because their books are like fit in the palm of your hand. They're tiny.
Right.
Yeah,
so,
it was
Like this.
Yeah. Neal's got another one too. Like, okay, we're the same.
yeah, exactly. And
stashed on the shelf.
Yeah, I think, but Dark Horse was like, yeah, okay, more is better, and people in the West are used to reading substantial, again, Stephen King books, yay thick, and so people are like, okay, yeah, put 2 of them together, great, Journey to the North Sea, or put them both together, and that worked out great. It's good if you got 2. It's good if you got 4. We had one that was 3, and so it was a double size and then a single size. But yeah, I'm glad it went the way it did in English.
Okay. Awesome. That's good to know. Alrighty, moving on then. Question 7. Is Left Hand funnier in English or Japanese?
Oh, God, I hope so. Lefty is probably the toughest thing in the books because of the way he speaks. He speaks in old man Japanese. He is the crotchety old man. And so he can say one word. And a lot of times in Mr. Kikuchi's work, the speaker is not attributed. But oh, that's crotchety old man Japanese. That's got to be what Lefty said. So that's a struggle. It's always a struggle what to do with him. He's a little pervy. He's very crotchety, and he does make the book. Originally, Mr. Kikuchi wasn't going to have that whole thing, but he realized that D is so taciturn that there'd be like no dialogue at all in the book. So they had to give him this kind of sidekick character and get him talking to someone or something. And it definitely paid off. I mean, he is a light side to the series, and I enjoy him.
Yeah, well, and as you mentioned, it was such an essential aspect of of this moving the story forward. It's like that internal voice, but also conflicting. I mean, it's really gives us greater insight into D.
I think so, because we're never getting inside D's head. Mr. Kikuchi, he loves the action and the side characters, the girl who needs rescuing or the kid who needs help. We'll get a little into their heads, but we never get into D's head. And so his dialogues with Lefty is about the only insight into him we get.
Very difficult character to write. I was staring at that page for hours saying, okay, I got to say something cool. I can't let him dominate, but when he talks, it has to mean something. And I hope it worked. But I mean, left hand, what was it? They call him a homunculus? A homunculus? Is that what he is? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an amazing creation. And putting words in his mouth or putting words in his hand, as they would say, it's extraordinarily difficult. But if you can nail it, you got it, because that's what people remember. People love left hand.
Oh,
yeah. And I shared in an earlier one that my very first official meeting about Vampire Hunter D in Davis Films was when I was brought into an executive meeting, and we were, the studio was wanting to know if they were going to support, finance Vampire Hunter D. And one of the execs was like, do we need that face in the hand thing? I'm like, yes, you do.
Yes, you do.
Now again, this was like in 2008. So, technology wasn't also like what it is now in filmmaking, but yeah, you can't make the Vampire Hunter D movie or series without Lefty. So
yeah.
We did touch on this a little earlier, but this question is a little more specifically directed. Are there things that get lost in translation because it may not be directly translatable, such as modes of honorific speech?
Yeah, that's definitely an issue that ends up taking more explanation. Some of the Japanese customs of referring to a woman that's not related to you as your aunt, or someone calling D their big brother or something, it's kind of tough to make that fit into the regular English mold, because it's not something that is universal in other countries. So honorific speech is difficult. Usually the vampires as a whole have a higher level of diction, but we don't have that same vertical social structure that Japanese has, so it's a little difficult. I don't know that they get lost, but they definitely get attenuated in translation. It does get stretched out a bit.
Gotcha. Brandon, Neal, other than the questions we've asked from fans, is there anything else you guys wanted to ask Kevin before we wrap up the Q&A portion and transition to story portion?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there were symbols in the kanji that had an emotional weight or an emotional meaning that doesn't have a direct kind of correlation in the U.S. Like a kind of jealousy or a kind of feeling of calm or peace. Because we're in the new year, and I have a Japanese friend who tells me that people throw out a lot of stuff at the end of the year just so they can cleanse and make space. And I forgot what the word was, but we don't really have that kind of same word. We would just call it a decluttering, but they have
the osoji.
Yeah, thank you. That's it. Thank you.
The osoji. Oh yeah,
osoji.
Yeah,
so,
I did that. Yeah, it was painful.
Yeah, I need to do that. Good God. But
I needed
but I was just thinking, things like osoji. How do you find that? What do you put in? How do you figure out what would be best so that the Westerners can get it?
Yeah. Sometimes I'll run something by my wife. My wife is Japanese, and I'll just ask her, am I getting this right? This is what it feels like to me, but to a Japanese, does it feel the same, or is it kind of a different tack? And I've done the same, with asking Mr. K himself, what did you mean by this? The very first thing I ever translated publication here was some work by a Japanese poet who had died, and I really missed being able to ask him things that I wanted clarification on. So I really take advantage of that with Mr. K, and even just asking him, how do you want the name spelled? This character, do you want it with a K, with a C, with an R, with an L? And he's like, I can't believe you take the trouble to ask me that. I can't believe someone would not take the trouble to ask you that when they could, because you're here, But whatever.
Yeah, I had a similar kind of in the similar vein, because in Japan you also have like sayings like kotowaza, and I mean I have a whole book that I always refer to friends called "The Japanese Have a Saying for That," and it's literally it's a collection of sayings that literally almost anything that would take you a sentence or two to describe, Japanese have a kotowaza or short little saying that's like 3 words that encapsulate that thing. And and a lot of them are translatable, but some of them are like really specific to Japanese culture or Japanese philosophy, like the mentality of Japanese people. And I'm just wondering how that must also be a hurdle, because in what few I've read in Japanese, they're littered with that.
Yeah, that's very true. Luckily, I've been here for 35 years now, so I've actually lived a lot of it and heard a lot of it in context. When I started translating, it was kind of before the whole internet information age. So basically, you were down to translating what you knew or what you had for books on hand. And, they say that you write what you know. Well, that goes double for translating, because if you don't know, horror movies and cowboy movies and stuff like that, then the D stuff was difficult to get into. Now with the internet, you just throw a name in there and see if there was some kind of tricky reference that I hadn't caught before. But yeah, back in the day, it was tough.
Well, unless somebody's got anything else, Kevin, thank you so much for taking time to answer these questions.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah.
And for audience, the next episode you'll be hearing from us after this Q&A is Stories with Kevin Leahy and his almost 40-year history with the franchise, as next year is the 40th anniversary of the first VHD movie. If you're in the United States, go and check out in April, AMC, currently it's a 1-day only, re-release of 40th anniversary of the 1985 Vampire Hunter D movie. Yeah, I don't know about anywhere else in the rest of the world, but AMC is doing it here in the US. And I have 4 different AMC theaters within stone's throw driving distance of my house. So I think you'll know where I'll be at the beginning of April.
They should give out a left hand like a glove or something,
Oh my gosh, that's a brilliant idea. I was just gonna say
wait a
that.
minute. None of that.
Like the worm popcorn, the worm popcorn cap from Dune.
Yeah, exactly.
Only more family friendly.
Awesome. Well, thank you all, and we will see you in episode 7.
Thank you for listening to Lefty Speaks, the official Vampire Hunter D podcast, hosted by Brandon Easton, Neal Fischer, and Scott McLean. This podcast is created by Unified Pictures and 9 Realms. Narration by Lauren Evallen-Muller. Recording and editing by 9 Realms. Produced by Scott McLean and Ian E. Muller. Based on the works created by Hideyuki Kikuchi. Happy hunting!